Hi folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast. This is Season 16, Episode 4. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Here we are once again. Great to have you with me. Thank you so much for joining me. Last week, we spent some time getting current with our sort of amassed pension plans, investments, bank accounts, insurance policies, all that stuff. And today, we need to decide what we're actually going to do with all that information. Calling today's episode, Positioning the Pieces. After the main body of the show, as usual, I'll look at a review that's been left, announce what we're going to be talking about next time. Quick ad for Meaningful Academy at the end as well. But before any of that, remember, this podcast continues to be brought to you with the help of my good friends at 7 Investment Management. They've been helping me out here on Meaningful Money for absolutely ages, since the spring of 2011, incredibly. So that shows incredible fortitude on their part. So please do check out what they're up to. They're at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. Go check them out. Okay, hopefully you feel more financially organized after last week's show, maybe more so than you've ever done in the past. Of course, for many of you, the processes we talked about last week, they're second nature to you already. Now, ideally, you'll have maybe a one-page summary of where all your money is currently held, information about the charging structure, investment approach in each plan, all the stuff you need to know. Now we need to start moving our pieces into the right places so that we can begin our retirement, or at least optimize the run-in to retirement in a good strategic position. Remember, notes, links from today's show, they're at the show notes. This is the only link you need to remember if you're out and about. Just remember this one, meaningfulmoney.tv/HS4. That's for Home Straight, Episode 4. Home Straight is what we're calling this season. meaningfulmoney.tv/HS4. Here's everything you need to know first. Okay, first thing we need to know is that we shouldn't move money around for the sake of it, right? You'll often hear me talking about simplicity and flexibility and cost when it comes to optimizing things like pensions and investments. In fact, wait until you hear what the second thing you need to know is. But I think it's important right at the start to establish that there must always be a clear reason for moving money around between different plans, from one plan to another. There should always be a clear benefit to you in doing so. Now, that benefit might come in the form of greater investment choice, reduced costs, added convenience. All of those are legitimate reasons for moving money. But I think that a general rule of thumb should be that the money should stay where it is unless a clear benefit to moving can be identified. Now, if you're the kind of person who is into FIRE, that's financial independence, retire early, then chances are you've already got a super low cost, flexible investment or pension plan, which will probably serve your needs adequately. But most of us, perhaps those not quite so engaged with our finances, we kind of suffer from inertia when it comes to dealing with our financial plans. And that's why very often we build up so many different pots over time. It's also important, I think, to understand that there is often no such thing as the best, in inverted commas, place for your money. More likely, there'll be many possible perfectly good or even great places for it. And choosing one over another won't actually make that much difference in the grand scheme of things. So be careful not to overthink this stuff, okay? Second thing we need to know is that we're aiming for simplicity and flexibility. I told you I talk about this a lot. So we're aiming for simplicity because we're going to have lots to think about in the run into retirement. We're going to be covering some of that, obviously, in the next few weeks. And at the point at which we decide to start drawing down on our money rather than saving it, then we're going to have lots of decisions to make. And so we don't need that whole process complicating any more than is necessary by sort of hanging on to dodgy old plans which no longer serve the purpose for which they were started. Obviously, we want our plans to be as flexible as possible because of the ever-changing nature of retirement. We're quite likely to need access to money on an ad hoc as well as a regular basis once we do start drawing down. And the last thing we need to find then is that our money is held in a place where we can't exercise that kind of flexibility. So whenever we're considering potential new homes for our money, we've got to ask ourselves whether it offers a simple and flexible place for us to hold our hard-won cash compared with where it is currently. I'm going to clear my throat and I'm going to pull down the microphone while I do that. 1 second. There we go. You didn't hear a thing. Now, third thing we need to know is that you don't need to do this all at once. Really important. Give yourself permission to do this whole process over a period of weeks, if not months. People pay advisors like me to do this thinking for them, and obviously the implementation very often as well. I mean, there are chances are that there are about 400 million things that you would rather be doing than organizing your pension plans and stuff. That's why I and people like me have a job. But unless you're planning to retire next week, chances are that you've got the time to do this whole process slowly, and better done right than done quickly, right? Really important. So give yourself a break. You don't have to sort of fix all this in one go, right? You can do it over a matter of weeks, months, even over a year or two, if necessary, as long as you've got the time, obviously, before you retire. Okay, quick summary then. We don't move money for the sake of it, but we are looking to simplify and maintain flexibility in all of our financial dealings. So to that end, what do we actually need to do? Okay, here's what you need to do. Let's deal with pensions first. When it comes to pensions, given that you're going to be retiring, shall we say, before too long, all right, if you're listening and you're in this home straight season of your life, given that you're going to be retiring before too long, you ought to be looking for a plan which provides something called Flexi Access Drawdown, or FAD. Now, FAD allows you to draw what you want, when you want, from your pension plan, obviously subject to income tax once the initial tax-free cash has been taken. Now, a prospective home for your pension funds should also allow phasing into Flexi Access Drawdown in tranches rather than all at once in one big lump. We're going to look into phasing into retirement in a couple of weeks' time, and that will help sort of put some meat on the bones. First thing we need to do, though, is establish whether any of your existing pension pots will allow you to go into Flexi Access Drawdown. A simple yes or no will suffice for now. Now, each plan which is a no is a candidate for being moved into a plan that is a yes. Okay? Now, of the yes plans, we need to establish the cost of entering drawdown. Very often there is a one-off charge for the transition. It's usually fairly nominal with most providers. And you need to check if that applies more than once if you phase into drawdown in tranches, because if you do, that might get expensive. Quite likely there will be an annual drawdown charge too, because there are obligations that a pension provider has, such as reporting to HMRC. Once you've identified which, if any, of your pots offer full Flexi Access Drawdown at the lowest price, you're going to need to see if there are any providers out there which are cheaper and or which offer better underlying investment options. Now, Which magazine have done this for you. There's a comparison page on the Which site, which isn't paywalled, interestingly. It's fairly simplistic, but it is reasonably up to date, so as of June 2019. So I'll make sure there's a link to that in the show notes, meaningformoney.tv/HS4. Remember, you're looking for lowest cost as long as the platform still does what you need it to do. Cost isn't everything, but it is, of course, important. So I'll say it again. I say this seems like most weeks at the minute. I really don't see why anybody would have more than one pension pot unless they have old plans with unusual benefits like enhanced tax-free cash or guaranteed annuities or something like that. You will have identified any of those plans during the exercise we talked about last week. So apart from any plans like that, you should feel okay about consolidating into the most cost-effective plan which does everything you need it to, right? That is the arbiter of what is the right plan. Most cost-effective and still does everything you need it to. Okay, let's look at investments next. We need to look at all our investment pots. Chances are for most of us these will be ISAs, but there might be general investment accounts, which we call GIAs, or even perhaps some more esoteric stuff like VCTs and AISs or investment bonds or whatever. Now, last week you'll have established what they all are, how much is in them, the investment approach, and the charging structure. But what should you do now? Well, the thinking here is that we need to be able to access this money at different times and in different ways, either ad hoc or by taking regular withdrawals. Later in the season, I'll be discussing the way to sort of optimize your retirement income sources. But for now, what we really want is flexibility above almost everything else. Now, fortunately, most investment accounts are easily accessible. You want to make sure that there are never any exit fees for taking your own money out, okay? Now, if you've got investments with time constraints on them, like fixed term bonds, or maybe reducing exit penalties if you're in the first 5 years of a plan, then there's no rush to sort of get out of these. Better usually to let them run their course. Make a note of when you can take your money out without costs so you can shift it around then. Stick it on your calendar a few weeks before so you can begin the process. Now, if you've got a bunch of ISAs dotted around, you can consider tidying them up onto one platform where maybe you can hold different sub-accounts within your ISA. If not, just make sure that the platform you choose is cost effective, got a decent investment selection, and where you can dial up regular or ad hoc withdrawals without any charge. Obviously, if you've got any ISA allowance left, just use it up, right? If you've got a GIA kicking around, while at the same time you've got unused ISA allowance, that's just madness. Just top up your ISA with the GIA money. If you've got investment bonds, these are a particular specific kind of investment, issued by insurance companies usually. Don't be hasty in selling these. They have a fairly useful facility whereby you can draw 5% of the original investment per year without tax implications. And that might be useful for our purposes down the line. I shouldn't say without tax implications. They're not tax-free, they're tax-deferred. It's a little bit of a fine line, and they're sort of splitting hairs, but it is important. So don't rush to sell out of those. They might be useful, okay? Just make sure you're not overpaying on things like charges. Chances are, if you have an investment bond, you won't have a massive investment list to choose from, okay? But those tax-deferred withdrawals outweigh that, probably. Also, there might be tax implications if you dump the whole thing in one go, so tread really carefully and seek advice if you're in any doubt. If you've got EISs or VCTs, there are probably reasons that you've got them, okay? Maybe you're a high earner, maybe you've already maxed out your ISA and pension allowances. Now, once you retire, that's likely not to be the case, so you might not really have any need for those more esoteric investments at that time. But if you do, seek advice about whether or not to dispose of them, when to do so, or whether you should keep them in light of your pending changing circumstances. Again, simple is best, right? Try to get things tidy, down to the simplest form they can be, but not so simple as to cause yourself problems, tax bills, either now or down the line, okay? Seek advice if in any doubt. Finally, let's take a look at your insurances. Obviously, I'm a big fan of insurance, but there is no point at all in having too much of it. So if you've paid your mortgage off, if you've got no other debt, if you've got no dependents, then your need for life assurance is going to be way less than somebody who obviously still got kids at home and a mortgage to pay. Reassess your need for cover. I've just realized all my lights have gone off behind me. 1 second, I'll fix that. There you go. Little thing for people watching on video there. So reassess your need for cover. As always, this is going to be down to taking the time to think through the implications of you either no longer being around or not having an income. If you or your partner would be adversely impacted by the other one dying, then some life cover is obviously still going to be in order. How much cover is a function of the magnitude of that impact. Pick a number, compare that with the current level of cover on your existing plans, and take a view. Loss of income, of course, is a different issue. Chances are if you're on the home straight, you might be at the peak of your earnings power, possibly pumping as much money as you can into pensions and investments. Or maybe you reckon you've had enough and you've got enough money behind you and you're already winding down, reducing your work hours and your income. Again, think through the impact on your plans if you had to give up work tomorrow. Would you still be able to retire when you're planning to? If so, would you have to reduce your standard of living? Look at all your existing cover and ask whether it is still needed, and if it is, whether the particular cover that you've got is up to scratch. Okay? So just all the stuff that we've talked about reviewing things regularly, you're doing that now in the home straight, but you're doing it focused on what your needs are into retirement. Okay? Finally, it's vital to stay invested. The classic approach to wealth in the last years before retirement was to reduce the risk of your portfolio as you approach your retirement date. The thinking behind that, of course, was that retirement used to be a cash event. And by that, I mean it was an event where people converted sort of invested money within the pensions and stuff like that into cash to buy an annuity. And because that was a one-off transaction, the last thing you wanted to do was to experience a downturn in the market 6 weeks before that event and then find yourself on a lower income for life as a result, okay? So what you did was you reduced the risk in the years up to retirement to prevent that from happening. Now, there is still an argument for buying an annuity in certain circumstances, and we'll address that later on in the season. But most folks don't buy annuities these days. Most go into Flexi Access Drawdown instead. And that means that the money still needs to work. It still needs to grow. That in turn obviously means the money should stay invested, even as you approach the finish line. Now, please, folks, understand that this is a general rule, okay? There are always exceptions. I was talking with a friend the other day who is in the council DB pension scheme. He has an AVC where the rules of the scheme say that the AVC could be the source of the tax-free cash part of his DB pension, which would leave the pension itself intact. This will mean a cash event, and as such, he probably should start reducing the risk of his AVC investments from about 5 years or so before his intended retirement date. Golden rule: if there's a cash event on the horizon, de-risk that money in good time before that event becomes due. If instead you're going to be drawing from an investment or a pension portfolio forever, then the last thing you need to do is to shift it into cash. Okay? Right, we've talked about simplification, as always. As ever, there are as many different situations as there are people listening to this episode, so it's hard to be too specific, right? So I'll just repeat what I've always said. This is the point in your financial life, this run into retirement, when it is arguably the best time that a decent professional financial planner can add the most value to you. So if you're in any doubt about any of this, don't make a mistake which will screw up your retirement, okay? Seek professional advice. It will more than pay for itself, way more than the fees that you're charged, okay? So good job, folks. We're well on the way to getting things in order for our retirement, but we got lots to cover yet. This is only episode 4 out of 10, so stay tuned for the rest of this season. Okay, here's a review titled Simply Invaluable by London Jason. I came across Pete's book and podcast about 6 weeks ago, having searched online for advice on saving strategies. The podcast soon became my default listening while running, commuting, or when just a bit bored, and I've got through the first 78 episodes so far. I've gone from having no clue whatsoever to putting a precise plan in place to build an emergency fund, open an ISA invested into a global index tracker, and take control of my workplace pension. All this was triggered by Pete's calm, clear, and easy-to-follow advice. If you're looking to improve your personal finance knowledge, this really is the best place to start. How lovely. What a great review. Thank you so much, London Jason. I really, really appreciate that. Well done you for taking action, though. Tell you what, folks, that's what it's all about. I can provide the information, but you're the ones that have got to do the work. So, London Jason, kudos for doing that, mate. Thank you so much. meaningfulmoney.tv/iTunes if you want to leave me a review, particularly if you're of an Apple persuasion. But wherever you're listening to this, if you can leave a review, please do. It keeps me near the top of the rankings and helps others to hear about the show. Quick plug, as usual, for the first phase of Meaningful Academy, which is now open to everybody. So maybe you're listening to this, you're not at the retirement stage yet, but you're looking instead to get started with your finances. You know, how do you even start with a budget, a spending plan? Well, Financial Foundations of Meaningful Academy is perfect. It covers everything from mindset, goal setting, setting and sticking to a budget, debt elimination, the basics of insurance, saving, investing, everything you need to know. Video lessons, worksheets, calculators, everything you need to start your personal financial journey on the right foot. Okay, so head over to meaningfulacademy.com. All the information that you need is there. But don't forget, as a podcast listener, you get 25% off by using the coupon code podcast25, all one word. Okay, meaningfulacademy.com. Use the coupon podcast25 when you sign up. Okay, next time we are going to be talking about aligning your retirement with your partner, right? Wherever there are two people involved, it's important to be on the same page, even if you keep your finances largely separate. So I'll be talking about the way to address this, some practical stuff about how to make it all work, okay? So looking forward to that. And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was helpful. meaningfulmoney.tv/HS4 for any questions and comments, plus all the links and all that good stuff. Hope you enjoyed it, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate your company each week and all the great things that you're telling me online about what you're doing with this information. Cheers, and I'll talk to you next week.